How to properly wax the string on your crossbow. That's this episode of Death by Bunjie. I'm working on a video for next week about how to hunt with your crossbow in tough weather conditions, in bad weather, rain, snow, stuff like that. Waxing the string on your crossbow is a big part of that, and that's why I thought I'd make a separate video for this week about how I wax the string on my crossbow, and a couple of things to take into account, including whether or not you should wax the center serving on your crossbow. I've had quite a few questions on the Facebook page and a few comments here on YouTube, people asking me how to wax the string on a crossbow and whether I do a video on it, so here it is. Now, why do we wax the string on a crossbow? Let's start with that. The reason you want to wax the string on your crossbow is, number one, to preserve its life, to make it last longer. If the string gets dry, it creates more friction, it's more vulnerable to getting bumped in the woods on twigs and branches and stuff like that, and it will start chipping away at the fibers in the string. So we want to wax it to add a little layer of protection on the outside. Another reason that you want to wax your string, however, is to reduce string stretch. Believe it or not, by waxing the string, you're maintaining the wax that's inside the string, the chemicals that are inside the string, the consistency of the fibers inside the string. You're sort of locking all that in place so the string won't stretch as much over time. That's actually one of the reasons why when I take the string off, either whether I'm resting it over the winter or if I am getting the strings serving replaced or something like that, or changing the string for any reason, I typically will unwind the string just a little bit, wax the string on its entire length, and then rewind it back up a little bit. The reason I do that, as long as you got it wound evenly on both sides, it seems to perform perfectly, but by replacing some of that wax on the inside of the string, it does seem to protect it a little bit better and reduces the string stretch. I don't find myself having to worry about my brace height as much. Strings are going to stretch. That's every crossbow. That's just the nature of the beast. But you can reduce that a little bit with proper waxing, and maybe adding a little bit of extra wax when you take those strings off and when you unwind them. And as I always say, accuracy is number one when you're hunting with your crossbow. The number one thing we can do is make sure that we are shooting accurately. A wax string will help you do that because it provides that consistency. It means the string, if it's always waxed at about the same level, it means it's going to continually perform the same way every time you take a shot, and that's very important because accuracy is number one with crossbows. Now, what kind of wax are we going to use? First of all, I want to distinguish between wax for your string and lube for your rail. There is a product or two on the market now that sort of serves both purposes. Use those with a little bit of caution, I guess. I would check with my manufacturer before I would do that. I've already done a video on how I lube the rail. Go check that video out. It's a very important topic and one that I overlooked for a long time. Then I had some problems while I was hunting, so did some videos on that in the past. But that's a separate topic. The wax is actually like candle wax. This is an old package of Excalibur's serving wax. It's just a little container of wax. It looks just like sort of a loose, more moist version of candle wax is all it is. But it's the wax that they sell that's specifically for crossbow strings. So that's what I use. Wax is not the lube. It's not intended to lubricate. That's what the rail lube is for. Instead, it's for the protection. It's to provide that extra layer of protection on the string. I bought this little container back in 2010 when I bought Bunjie. I bought this to go along with it, and I've been using it ever since. It's actually, I don't think they make this type of product anymore. It looks different when you look at it on their website now. But this is certainly has served its purposes with this crossbow. And I say this over and over, but always go to your manufacturer's website. Always talk to your manufacturer on the phone, send them an email, whatever, before you start buying products and using new products with your crossbow. Use whatever your manufacturer recommends. At the end of this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about waxing the serving, and you'll see the difference in the manufacturers. It's a big difference between different manufacturers. So take that into account. Always check with your manufacturer first. As far as when you want to wax your crossbow string, I've read some people say every 50 shots, some people say every 100 shots, every 75 shots or whatever. I don't think that's a good way to tell whether or not your crossbow string needs to be waxed. The number of shots that you take, I might take 75 shots in an entire year with this thing. I don't know, I don't even count the shots, but the number of shots that I take is not necessarily what's important to me. To me, I can tell if I need to wax a string on my crossbow simply by touching it. Run your fingers over it. If it's not sticking to your fingers and it feels dry to the touch, time to wax your string. If, on the other hand, you touch it and it's a little bit tacky and you can feel it sticking to your fingers a little bit and you got a little bit of wax on your fingers when you get done touching the string, sure, that string is properly waxed. So you don't need to add wax to it. Another thing you want to look at periodically every time you go hunting or every time you target shoot, look at your string and see if there's any fraying of the fibers in the string. If there is, it's time to wax the string at a minimum, and if there's too much fraying, it might be time to replace that string. A couple other considerations about waxing the string on your crossbow. First of all, if you have, this is a recurve crossbow, it just has a string, I wax the string in its entirety all the way to the end, including the cat whiskers. I wax those a little bit, get a little bit on there, go all the way out to the mag tips on the end. I actually wax clear around here all the way around the entire end of the limb as well. You get the string in there good. When I take the strings off, I usually run a little bit of wax over that before I put it back on too, just to make sure it's waxed on all sides. If you have a compound crossbow, one with the pulleys and all that other good stuff, those crossbows have all the cables. From everything I have read, I don't own one of those, but you're going to want to wax not just the string, but also those cables. And it makes sense. I mean, you want to protect them as well from wear and tear. They're holding a lot of friction, or they generate a lot of heat, and you want to make sure that they are properly protected as well. Now, how do we wax the string? With the newer ones, it's almost like a stick of antiperspirant. Basically, you take the cap off, rub it on the string real good, and then work it in with your fingers. The heat from your fingers is what dissipates that wax, and works it into the little crevices, and creates that protective layer. With the newer ones, it's a lot easier. When I replace this finally, I'll be able to run it right over there and go through and just rub it all in, and everybody will be happy. On the other hand, with this, the older style waxes, I just take the lid off, and I've got this little container of wax. Now, two ways you can do this. You can take your fingernail, you can take, I've taken a screwdriver that I use for the scope, that kind of thing. Get a little pea-sized piece of wax between your fingers, heat it up good with your fingers, roll it around between your fingers so it's nice and pliable, and then we're just going to work it back and forth on the string like that, and sort of work it in, and use the heat from your fingers to sort of work that in and get it really good. Again, I'll do the same thing, touch up these cat whiskers, and then I'll go around the ends of the limbs and work it in here as well, so that it gets in here good, so that it is protecting the entire length of the string. The other way to do it, if you have one of these older containers of wax like that, get the lid off, just pop the wax out, and this is actually the way I do it all the time. You can see the marks on here. I just take it like this, and then I run the wax back and forth on the string like this. Run it back and forth, everybody, and then you can put it on the bottom as well. Make sure you get all different sides of the string. And then when you're done, set that down, just go through and, again, heat it up good with your fingers to wax. Work that wax in there good so that it is nice and worked in there. Spend 5 minutes doing that. It will make the string a lot happier. Now, the big question about waxing your crossbow string. Do you wax the center serving? Now, I'm going to cop out a little bit here and say, ask your manufacturer. Your manufacturer will tell you whether or not you're supposed to wax the center serving. A lot of people have asked me on Facebook and on the YouTube channel as well, do you wax the center serving? The answer to that for me generally is yes. I wax it very sparingly, but with some manufacturers, if you read their websites, they say absolutely under no circumstances do you ever wax the center serving. You are okay if you don't wax it. Why? Because that serving is running up and down on the rail, and that smooth rail, if it is properly lubricated, like I did in the other video there, then it's a nice sheen on there, it's a nice smooth surface, and it won't wear your serving out because of that. Your serving should last pretty good. The serving is also made out of a separate kind of material that is a little bit more durable. These have been reserved. I showed you on the Facebook page here recently that my serving was wearing out, so I had it reserved before I go hunt here in the late season. So that new serving that they put on here is more of a wire material than a tapey type material that came on it before. All of my strings now are reserved with this heavier material, this harder material, and it will stand up a lot more to the abuse on the rail and all that stuff. So you do have to replace those servings, and it only costs a few dollars to get it done at a local shop. On the Excalibur, they actually have a video on their webpage saying, hey, make sure you wax that serving, here's how you do it. And you basically do it the same way. You just lift it up and sort of rub that wax around on it real good and work it in with your fingers. It serves two purposes if you do that. Number one, it protects that serving when it's cocked back here under pressure. It makes that serving last a little bit longer. It also is going to make it stand up to the wear and tear of the rail as you're firing those crossbows, as you're pushing the arrow out, all that heat that is generated. And there is quite a bit, believe it or not. That will make that serving stand up to that much better. Putting wax on the serving will reduce friction the same way that putting wax on the runners of your sled will make your runner sled go faster. So I will put a light coat of wax on that serving on this crossbow. However, other manufacturers say flat out, do not wax your serving under any circumstances. Some manufacturers do. And the reason they say that is because if you got wax on that serving, that comes back here in the trigger mechanism where it's being held while you're hunting. It's cocked in there, and then that wax is being held under pressure in there, and that wax will work its way off of there and gum up your trigger mechanism, your safety mechanism, all that. And if you're gumming up the works in there and putting wax in there, then you go out hunting and dust gets in there and dirt gets in there and water gets in there. All that stuff's going to sort of work that wax together and create a big old mass in there. And then you got a problem on your hands to go and clean out that trigger assembly later on and get it so it functions properly. It could affect the performance of your crossbow. So you want to avoid that. That's the reason some manufacturers say not to do that. I think that the reason that there is differences between different manufacturers is simply because they have different types of trigger mechanisms. They might have different things going on in here. I don't know. This particular Excalibur might have one trigger assembly that a few years later they stopped making and started making a different one. And if that's the case, that one may not want the wax. I don't know. Because this is a tougher material, I'm not as much concerned about it as I am the rest of the string, but I do put a light coat of wax on there before I go out and hunt, just because that's what they recommend, and I stick with what the manufacturers recommend. So, do you wax the center serving on your crossbow? I can't answer that question for you. Nobody on the internet can properly answer that question for you except for the manufacturer of your crossbow. That's the person you should be asking. Well, there you have it. That's everything I think you need to know about waxing the string on your crossbow. I hope that helps you with your success with your crossbow hunting. And if you have any comments, please let me know. If you have any other additional comments about how to do this or questions about it, let me know, and I'll do my best to answer them. I love hearing from you. I love to hear other people's comments about crossbows and about stuff that relates to crossbow hunting. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. It's free. If you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe so you can be notified of new videos on Death by Bunjie. Check out our Facebook page as well. And until next time, all hail Bunjie!